My sister is marrying my former bully and expects me to be a groomsman. I was staring at the engagement photo on my phone when my hands started shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. My sister Olivia was beaming in a white sundress, arms wrapped around Derek Brennan's neck while he grinned at the camera with that same cocky smile I remembered from 15 years ago. The same smile he wore when he shoved my head into a toilet bowl, when he posted pictures of me crying online, when he convinced half the school I was a pervert who took photos in the locker room. My mom's text underneath read, "Your sister has wonderful news. Derek proposed. We're thinking a spring wedding. She wants you as a groomsman." I sat in my car in the parking garage of my office building for 20 minutes, staring at that photo, my stomach churning with a nausea I hadn't felt since high school. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed as I tried to process how this was possible, how my sister could be engaged to the person who made my teenage years a living hell. I'd worked hard to build a life away from that past. After high school, I'd gone to college 3 states away, gotten my degree in engineering, landed a solid job at a tech firm. I was 31 now, living in Seattle, successful by any reasonable measure. I hadn't seen Derek Brennan in over a decade. I'd heard through social media that he'd become some kind of sales executive, moved to Portland, completely reinvented himself apparently. What I hadn't heard was that he'd been dating my sister for the past 18 months. Olivia and I had never been particularly close. 7 years age difference meant we grew up in different worlds. She was 24, working in marketing, and we maybe talked once a month. But this? This felt like a betrayal I couldn't comprehend. I tried calling her immediately, hands still trembling as I pressed her contact. It went to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. By the third attempt, I was already driving toward my parents' house 40 minutes away. My parents' living room hadn't changed much since I'd moved out 13 years ago. Same beige sectional, same family photos on the mantle, same smell of vanilla candles my mom always burned. They were sitting together on the couch when I arrived unannounced, my dad reading something on his tablet while my mom scrolled through wedding magazines. "Sweetheart!" Mom jumped up, arms outstretched. "Did you see Olivia's news? Isn't it wonderful?" I stayed in the doorway. "Mom, do you know who Derek Brennan is?" She blinked at me, confused. "Of course. He's Olivia's fiancé. Such a charming young man. He works in medical device sales, very successful. They met at a networking event last year." My dad finally looked up. "Something wrong, son?" I felt my jaw tighten. "Dad, Derek Brennan bullied me mercilessly throughout high school. He made my life absolute hell for 4 years." There was a long silence. My mom's smile faltered. "What? No, honey, you must be thinking of someone else." "It's the same person, Mom. I'm looking at his photo right now. Same face, same name, same Derek Brennan who tormented me from freshman through senior year." My dad set down his tablet slowly. "That was a long time ago. People change." I stared at him. "People change?" "Dad, he orchestrated a campaign to destroy my reputation. He spread rumors I was a predator. He assaulted me physically dozens of times. He posted humiliating photos of me online that took years to scrub from the internet. And you're telling me people change?" Mom moved toward me, hands clasped. "Sweetie, I'm sure it wasn't as bad as you remember. Teenagers are cruel sometimes, but I cut her off. "It was exactly as bad as I remember. Worse, probably. I had panic attacks every morning before school. I tried to tell you both back then, and you said I needed to toughen up." The words came out harder than I intended, years of resentment bubbling to the surface. My dad's face darkened. "We didn't raise you to hold grudges. Your sister is happy. Are you really going to ruin that for her because of some high school drama?" I left without another word, my chest tight with fury and disbelief. Back in my car, I sat in their driveway trying to process what had just happened. My own parents had minimized my trauma, dismissed years of torment as high school drama. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through my old Facebook account, the one I'd abandoned years ago but never deleted. It took me 15 minutes of searching through archived posts and photos before I found my old blog from sophomore year. I'd written about the bullying anonymously, pouring out my experiences in coded language, desperate for someone to hear me. I read through entries I'd written at 15, 16 years old. Detailed accounts of Derek cornering me in hallways, screenshots of the photoshopped images he'd circulated of me, messages from classmates who believed his lies. A post from my junior year where I'd written, "I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this." Reading it now, as an adult, I felt sick. This wasn't normal teenage conflict. This was systematic psychological warfare. My phone rang. "Olivia." I answered immediately. "We need to talk," I said before she could speak. "Yeah, apparently we do." Her voice was tight with irritation. "Mom just called me crying because you stormed into their house making accusations about Derek." I pulled the phone away from my ear for a second, took a breath. "Liv, they're not accusations. Derek bullied me severely throughout high school. I'm not making this up." She sighed, that same exasperated sound she'd made since childhood when she thought I was being dramatic. "Look, I don't know what happened between you two in high school, but that was 15 years ago. Derek has told me he wasn't perfect back then, that he was immature and made mistakes. but he's worked really hard to become a better person. He volunteers with at-risk youth now. He mentors teenagers struggling with behavioral issues. He's completely different. I felt my grip on the steering wheel tighten. He told you he made mistakes? Olivia, he tried to destroy my life. What exactly did he tell you about his mistakes? There was a pause. He said you two didn't get along, that there was conflict between you and some of his friends, that he probably could have been kinder. I laughed, a hollow sound. Didn't get along. Jesus Christ, Liv. He put me in the hospital twice, once with a concussion, once with cracked ribs. He created a fake social media account pretending to be me where he posted things that made me look like a sexual predator. I was investigated by the school. Do you understand what that did to me? Her voice went quiet. He never mentioned anything like that. I could hear doubt creeping in finally. Of course he didn't. Because he's rewritten history to make himself the hero of his own story. Liv, I need you to listen to me. I'm not trying to ruin your relationship, but I need you to know the truth about who you're planning to marry, and there is absolutely no way I can stand up at your wedding as his groomsman. I can't even be in the same room with him. She was silent for a long moment. I love him, she finally said, her voice small. I know you do. But love doesn't change facts. What he did to me happened. It was real. It was documented by the school. There are records, Liv. There are witnesses. Another pause. Can we meet? Just the two of us? I need to hear this properly, not over the phone. I agreed immediately. We set up a meeting for the following Saturday at a coffee shop halfway between Seattle and Portland. As I hung up, I felt a small measure of hope. Maybe she would listen. Maybe the truth would matter. But I also felt dread, because I knew what was coming. I was about to blow up my sister's life, and there was no version of this that ended well for everyone. The coffee shop was called Bridgetown Brews, a hipster place with exposed brick and too many succulents. I arrived 15 minutes early and ordered a black coffee I didn't drink, just sat there gripping the cup while my leg bounced under the table. Olivia walked in at exactly 2 o'clock, looking tired and worried. She'd always been the pretty one, a tall, blonde, effortlessly elegant where I was average in every way. She sat down across from me without ordering anything. Okay, she said. Tell me everything. So I did. I started from the beginning, from the first week of freshman year when Derek decided I was an easy target. How it started with name-calling and shoving, then escalated to systematic humiliation. I told her about the locker room incident where he claimed I was taking photos, how the rumor spread like wildfire, how I was questioned by administrators and had my phone searched, how even after they found nothing, the damage was done. Everyone believed I was guilty of something. I told her about the times he jumped me after school, always with friends around to make sure I couldn't fight back effectively. About the concussion I got from being slammed into a concrete wall, the cracked ribs from being kicked while I was down. About how I begged our parents to let me transfer schools and they refused, saying I needed to face my problems. About the fake social media accounts he created to impersonate me, posting vile things that made everyone hate me. About the photos he photoshopped to make it look like I was doing drugs, drinking, stealing. About how I spent my entire high school experience isolated, terrified, wanting to disappear. Olivia sat across from me, her face growing paler with each detail. Why didn't I know any of this? She asked quietly. I shrugged. You were in middle school when it started. Elementary school for some of it. Mom and Dad didn't talk about it because they didn't take it seriously, and I was ashamed. I thought, it was my fault somehow. She wiped at her eyes. I need to talk to Derek about this. I felt my stomach drop. Liv, be careful. He's had 15 years to perfect his version of events. He'll have explanations for everything. He'll make me sound like I'm exaggerating or lying. She stood up, shoulders squared. He's my fiancé. I need to hear his side. I wanted to argue, to tell her that his side didn't matter when the facts were clear, but I also understood. She loved him. She needed to confront this herself. As she left, I sat there feeling like I'd just detonated a bomb and was waiting for the explosion. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Nathan Dawson? The voice was male, unfamiliar, formal. Yes. Who's this? A pause. This is Derek Brennan. I think we need to talk. My first instinct was to hang up immediately. My second was to tell him to go to hell. Instead, I stayed silent, waiting. Look, Derek continued when I didn't respond. Olivia told me what you said about high school. I wanted to reach out personally because I think there's been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. I felt rage building in my chest. There's no misunderstanding, Derek. You made my life hell for 4 years. His voice changed, becoming more measured, almost therapeutic. Nathan, I'm not going to pretend I was a good person in high school. I wasn't. I was dealing with a lot of my own issues while my parents' divorce. Pressure from my dad to be tough, hanging with the wrong crowd. I made terrible choices and hurt people, including you. I've spent the last decade working on myself, going to therapy, trying to make amends for the person I used to be. It sounded rehearsed. Perfect. Exactly what a person would say if they'd spent years crafting a redemption narrative. You put me in the hospital, I said flatly. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm genuinely, deeply sorry for everything I did. I've changed, Nathan. I volunteer with kids now, specifically kids who are bullies, trying to help them before they make the same mistakes I did. I've built a life around trying to do better. I wanted to believe him. Part of me desperately wanted this to be real, for him to have actually transformed into a decent person. But I also remembered too clearly the calculated cruelty of his actions. This wasn't a kid acting out. This was someone who enjoyed inflicting pain. What do you want, Derek? I asked. He took a breath. I want to meet with you, face to face. No Olivia, no parents, just us. I want to apologize properly and see if we can find a way forward, for her sake. I should have said no. Every instinct screamed at me to refuse, but I was curious. I needed to look him in the eye and see if this remorse was real or just another manipulation. Fine. When? We met at a park in Portland the following Sunday. I arrived early again, scoping out the location, making sure it was public with plenty of people around. Derek showed up right on time, looking exactly like his engagement photo, tall, fit, dressed in an expensive-looking polo and khakis. The cocky teenager was gone, replaced by someone who looked like he belonged in a corporate catalog. He approached with his hands visible, non-threatening. Nathan, thanks for meeting me. Up close, I could see he had aged well. Square jaw, perfect teeth, the kind of confidence that came from success. He looked like someone who had everything figured out. We sat on a bench overlooking a duck pond. For a minute, neither of us spoke. I really am sorry, Derek finally said. I know that doesn't fix anything, doesn't erase what happened, but I need you to know I've worked hard to become someone different. The person I was in high school, that person, doesn't exist anymore. I studied his face, looking for cracks in the mask. You told Olivia we didn't get along. That's a pretty sanitized version of systematic torture. He nodded slowly. You're right. I minimized it because I was ashamed. Because telling her the full truth would mean admitting I was a monster. But I should have been honest from the start. This was the moment I needed to push harder. What specifically do you remember doing to me? His jaw tightened. I remember the physical stuff. Pushing you around, fighting. The locker room thing where I accused you of having your phone out. Starting rumors. I leaned forward. And the fake social media accounts? The photoshopped pictures? The organized campaign to destroy my reputation? He looked away. Yeah, that too. His voice had gone flat. I felt my stomach twist. Derek, that wasn't being a bully. That was sociopathic. You enjoyed it. I saw it in your face every time. You got off on having power over me. He turned back to me, and for just a second, I saw something flash across his features. Anger, resentment. Then it was gone, replaced by carefully constructed remorse. I was sick, Nathan. Mentally unwell. I've been in therapy for 8 years working through it. Have you told Olivia everything? Every detail? His hesitation told me everything. I've told her enough. I stood up. Then you haven't told her the truth. You've given her a curated version that makes you sympathetic. The troubled kid who made mistakes, not the calculating predator who systematically destroyed another person for entertainment. Derek stood too, and I instinctively stepped back. He noticed, and something flickered across his face again. Is that what you're going to tell her? That I'm irredeemable? That she should throw away the best relationship of her life because of things I did when I was a stupid teenager? I met his eyes. I'm going to tell her the truth and let her decide. If your redemption is real, it'll stand up to scrutiny. If it's not... I left the threat unfinished. His mask slipped further. You know what I think, Nathan? I think you're jealous. I think you've spent 15 years nursing this grievance because you can't handle that. I moved on and built a successful life while you stayed stuck in the past. There it was. The real Derek, still there under the polish. I'm not the one who's stuck, Derek. I'm the one who survived what you did and built a life anyway. You're the one who has to hide your past to function. I walked away before he could respond, my heart pounding. That flash of anger, that hint of the old Dereka. I'd seen it, and I knew Olivia needed to see it too. Over the next week, I did something I'd avoided for 15 years. I started gathering evidence. I dug through old emails, recovered deleted social media posts, found archived versions of the websites where Derek had posted about me. I contacted old classmates, people I hadn't spoken to since graduation, asking if they remembered what happened. Surprisingly, many of them responded. Several apologized for not standing up for me, back then. A few offered to provide statements about what they witnessed. One former friend, Justin Lambert, sent me screenshots he'd kept of messages from Derek bragging about breaking me. They were dated from our junior year. I found the hospital records from my concussion and cracked ribs, medical documentation stating the injuries were consistent with assault. I found the old police report my mom had filed after the second hospitalization, a report that went nowhere because Derek's family had money and connections. I compiled it all into a folder, organized by date and incident type. It took me 3 days of obsessive work, staying up until 3 in the morning, barely eating. My hands shook as I reviewed some of the evidence, memories flooding back so vividly, I felt like I was 17 again. On Thursday evening, I got a call from my mom. "Nathan, what are you doing?" Her voice was strained. "Derek called your father. He says you're harassing him, trying to sabotage his relationship with Olivia. He's considering getting a restraining order." I felt cold. "He's considering a restraining order?" "Mom, I met with him once because he asked me to. I haven't contacted him since." "Well, that's not what he told your father. He said you've been spreading lies about him to Olivia's friends, poisoning people against him." This was textbook Derica, getting ahead of the truth by framing me as the aggressor. "Mom, I haven't spoken to anyone except Olivia and Derek himself. He's lying to you." She sighed, that same exhausted sound from my childhood. "Nathan, sweetie, I think you need to consider talking to someone. A therapist, maybe. This obsession with the past isn't healthy. Derek has apologized, he's changed, and you're still holding on to this grudge." I hung up. I couldn't listen to it anymore. My own mother, choosing my abuser over me. Again. I sat in my apartment, staring at the folder of evidence on my laptop, feeling more alone than I had since high school. My phone buzzed. A text from Olivia. "Can we talk? Tomorrow? It's important." I agreed immediately, hope and dread warring in my chest. We met at her apartment in Portland the next evening. She lived in a modern building with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. I'd never been there before. Our relationship had never been close enough for casual visits. Derek wasn't there, thankfully. Olivia let me in, and I noticed immediately that she looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back messily. We sat in her living room, expensive furniture that looked barely used. "I've been doing some research," she said without preamble, "about what happened in high school." My chest tightened. "And?" She pulled out her phone, scrolled for a moment, then turned it to show me. It was a screenshot of one of the fake profiles Derek had made of me, archived on the Wayback Machine. "I found this. And the hospital records you mentioned, I called Mom and made her show me the report. And I talked to 3 of your old classmates who Derek is still friends with on Facebook. I asked them what they remembered." I held my breath. They all confirmed it. Every single one. One of them told me Derek used to brag about making your life hell. I felt tears prick my eyes. "You believe me?" She nodded, her own eyes wet. "I believe you. And I'm so sorry I didn't before. Sorry I dismissed it. Sorry I didn't know." For a moment, we just sat there, both of us crying quietly. Then she wiped her face and straightened. "I confronted Derek 2 days ago, showed him the evidence, told him I knew he'd lied to me about the extent of what happened." I leaned forward. "What did he say?" Her face hardened. At first he tried to stick to his redemption story, said he'd minimized it because he was ashamed, but I pushed harder, asked him specific questions about things I'd found, and eventually... She paused, swallowing hard. "Eventually he got angry. Really, angry. Said I was betraying him by believing you over him, that you were manipulating me, that you'd always been jealous of him and were trying to ruin his life now because you couldn't handle his success." My stomach dropped. There it was again. The real Derek. "What did you do?" She took a shaky breath. "I told him I needed space, asked him to leave my apartment. He refused at first, said we needed to work this out right now. Started getting aggressive, not physically, but intimidating, standing too close, raising his voice. I had to threaten to call security before he left." She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I saw it, Nate. The person you described. Just for a few minutes. But I saw him. And it terrified me because I realized I didn't know who I was actually engaged to." I reached across and took her hand. "I'm sorry. I know you love him. I wish I could tell you he'd changed." She shook her head. "He hasn't. I don't think people like that really do. They just get better at hiding it." She pulled her hand back and stood up, walking to the window. "I'm calling off the engagement. I can't marry someone who lied to me about something this fundamental. Someone who showed me in one moment of anger that they're still capable of that kind of cruelty. I should have felt victorious, vindicated. But I just felt sad. Sad for my sister, sad for the teenage version of myself, sad that Derek had managed to extend his destruction of people's lives 15 years past high school." "What do Mom and Dad say?" I asked. She laughed bitterly. "I haven't told them yet, but I'm sure they'll blame you somehow. Tell me I'm overreacting, that I'm throwing away a good man because of teenage mistakes." She turned back to me. "Nathan, I need you to do something for me." I nodded. "Anything." She came back to the couch, pulled out a flash drive from her pocket. "I copied everything I found, all the evidence I could locate. The fake profiles, the messages from your old classmates, everything. I want you to have it, and I want you to consider pressing charges." I stared at the flash drive. "Charges? Liv, this happened 15 years ago. The statute of limitations, ow. She cut me off. I talked to a lawyer friend yesterday. Just preliminary conversation, nothing official. She said some of what Derek did could potentially still be prosecuted, especially the cyber harassment and the assault charges that were never properly investigated. It's a long shot, but what? I asked. She met my eyes. But he needs to face real consequences, not just losing me, real accountability, because I don't think I'm the first person he's fooled, and I won't be the last. The weight of what she was suggesting settled over me. Going after Derek legally meant reopening everything, reliving it all, making it public, facing him in court potentially, fighting against his money and lawyers. It meant declaring war. I need to think about it, I said quietly. She nodded. I understand. But Nathan, he's going to come after you now. You cost him this relationship. He's not going to let that go. She was right. I could feel it already. The way he'd turned my parents against me. The restraining order threats. Derek's MO had always been to destroy people who crossed him. I was about to find out if he'd really changed, or just gotten more sophisticated in his attacks. The next 3 weeks were hell. Derek launched what I can only describe as a targeted campaign to destroy my credibility. He contacted my employer with allegations that I'd been making threatening phone calls to him, forcing me to sit through an HR investigation. He filed a police report claiming I'd been stalking him, which resulted in a detective showing up at my apartment to question me. He sent messages to mutual acquaintances from high school, claiming I'd become dangerously obsessed with him and was spreading vicious lies to sabotage his relationship. Several old classmates reached out, to me confused, asking what was going on. When I explained, most believed me they remembered Derek too well, but some took his side, convinced by his polished presentation that I was the problem. My parents stopped speaking to me entirely after Olivia called off the engagement and told them why. My mom left me a voicemail that I listened to once and then deleted, her voice shaking with fury as she called me jealous, vindictive, and cruel. I filed for a restraining order against Derek after he showed up at my apartment building one night, screaming at me through the intercom until security removed him. The court date was set for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, I did what Olivia suggested. I contacted a lawyer. Her name was Rebecca Torres, and she specialized in criminal cases involving harassment and assault. She had 17 years of experience and a reputation for taking difficult cases. We met in her office in downtown Seattle, a sleek space with law books lining the walls. I showed her everything, the evidence I'd compiled, the hospital records, the fake social media accounts, the witness statements. She reviewed it methodically, taking notes, asking pointed questions. After 2 hours, she sat back in her chair and looked at me seriously. This is substantial. What Derek did crosses into criminal territory in several ways: assault, cyber harassment, defamation, and possibly conspiracy if we can prove others were involved at his direction. I felt my heart rate pick up. Can we actually prosecute? After all this time? Rebecca nodded slowly. It's complicated. The physical assaults are likely outside the statute of limitations for criminal prosecution in most jurisdictions, unfortunately. But the cyber harassment of some of that might still be actionable depending on exactly when it occurred and what laws were on the books. And there's another angle. She leaned forward. His recent behavior toward you, the false police. Reports, the harassment, the defamatory statements to your employer. Those are all fresh charges, and they establish a pattern that could allow us to bring historical evidence as part of a larger case showing habitual harassment. I felt hope kindle in my chest for the first time in weeks. You think this could work? She didn't smile, but her eyes were determined. I think Derek Brennan has been getting away with terrorizing people for too long. I think it's time someone held him accountable. Are you prepared for how ugly this could get? I thought about it. Really thought about what I was signing up for. A legal battle against someone with resources and no moral boundaries. Public exposure of the worst period of my life. The possibility of losing and having everyone think I was the villain. Then I thought about 17-year-old me, contemplating suicide because I saw no way out. About my sister, who almost married this man without knowing who he really was. About whoever Derek's next victim would be if no one stopped him. Yes, I said. I'm ready. Rebecca nodded. Then let's go to war. The first step was compiling everything into an official complaint. Rebecca worked with a private investigator named Thomas Garrett, a former police detective with 32 years of experience, to gather additional evidence and witness statements. Thomas was methodical and thorough, tracking down people I'd lost touch with, finding documentation I didn't know existed. He discovered that Derek had been fired from 2 previous jobs for interpersonal conflicts. Code, it turned out, for bullying and harassment of coworkers. One former colleague was willing to provide a statement about Derek's behavior, describing a pattern of targeting people he perceived as weak and systematically undermining them. Thomas also found something that made my blood run cold. Derek had been investigated by his college for assault allegations his sophomore year. The case had been dropped after the victim declined to cooperate, likely under pressure. The pattern was undeniable. Derek had been doing this his entire life. We filed a formal criminal complaint with the Portland Police Department, documenting everything. The detective assigned to the case was Lieutenant David Ramos, a 23-year veteran who specialized in harassment cases. He interviewed me for 4 hours, going through every incident in chronological order. "This is one of the most comprehensively documented harassment cases I've seen," he told me at the end. "Most victims don't have this kind of evidence. It makes our job significantly easier." But he also warned me, "Derek Brennan has resources, good lawyers, and cases like this are hard to prosecute even with evidence. You need to prepare yourself for the possibility this doesn't end the way you want." I understood, but I also knew I couldn't back down now. While the criminal case was building, the restraining order hearing arrived. I sat in the courtroom with Rebecca beside me, while Derek sat across the aisle with his attorney, a sharp-dressed man named Gregory Ashford, who looked like he charged $1,000 an hour. Derek wouldn't look at me directly, keeping his eyes forward, his expression carefully neutral. When it was my turn to present evidence, Rebecca walked the judge through everything. Derek's harassment of me after I revealed the truth to Olivia, the false police reports, his appearance at my building. She played security footage from my apartment complex showing Derek banging on the intercom, his face twisted with rage. The difference between that man on the footage and the composed person sitting in the courtroom was stark. Derek's attorney argued that I had initiated contact, that I had deliberately interfered in his relationship, that his client was merely defending himself against my campaign of lies. He painted me as obsessive, vindictive, unable to let go of the past. It was a masterful performance. But Rebecca was ready. She produced the evidence of Derek's high school behavior, the pattern of harassment stretching back 15 years. She brought in Justin Lambert, my old classmate, who testified about Derek's behavior and the messages he'd saved. She showed the judge medical records, police reports, everything that established Derek as the aggressor, not the victim. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judith Kane, reviewed everything carefully. Then she looked at Derek directly. "Mr. Brennan, I'm troubled by what I'm seeing here. Your attorney paints you as a victim, but the evidence suggests a pattern of predatory behavior spanning nearly 2 decades. The restraining order is granted. You are to have no contact with Mr. Dawson, direct or indirect, for a period of 2 years. Any violation will result in immediate arrest." Derek's face remained impassive, but I saw his hands clench into fists. As we left the courtroom, Rebecca leaned close. "That was a win. But be careful. Men like Derek don't handle losing well." She was prophetic. 3 days after the restraining order, I got a call from Detective Ramos. "Nathan, we need to talk. Something's happened." My stomach dropped. "What?" He paused. "Derek Brennan has filed a counter-complaint. He's alleging that you've been stalking him, that you created fake evidence to frame him, and that you've been conducting a campaign of harassment. He's also filed a civil lawsuit against you for defamation, seeking damages of $500,000. I felt the world tilt. "He's suing me? For telling the truth?" Ramos sighed. "It's a slap suite of strategic lawsuit against public participation. He's trying to bury you in legal costs, make you back down. It's a common tactic." Rebecca confirmed this when I called her immediately after. Slap suits are designed to intimidate. They rarely succeed on merits, but they can drain your resources and energy. The good news is that we can fight it. And if we win, we can recover legal fees. "And if we lose?" I asked. She was quiet for a moment. "Then you're financially ruined, and Derek walks away having successfully weaponized the legal system against you." I felt trapped, exactly what Derek wanted. Over the next month, both cases moved forward simultaneously. The criminal investigation into Derek and the civil lawsuit he'd filed against me. The criminal case was slow, building methodically as Detective Ramos and Thomas Garrett continued gathering evidence. But the civil case moved fast. Derek's attorney filed motion after motion, each one requiring a response, each one costing me money I didn't have. Rebecca was working partially pro bono, but I still had costs piling up. Discovery was brutal. Derek's attorneys demanded access to all my communications, my medical records, my employment history. They deposed friends and colleagues, trying to paint me as unstable. They questioned my credibility by bringing up every mistake I'd ever made, every time I'd been fired or quit a job, every relationship that had failed. Meanwhile, the criminal investigation hit a snag. The prosecutor assigned to review the case, a man named Frank Delgado, expressed concern about the statute of limitations issues. "We can probably make charges stick for the recent harassment," he told Rebecca and me in a meeting. "But the historical stuff of the high school incidents, those are going to be very difficult to prosecute criminally at this point. We might have better luck with a civil suit for those." Which meant more legal battles, more costs, more of my life consumed by this fight. I was drowning. My work performance suffered as I spent hours on the phone with lawyers, reviewing documents, preparing for depositions. My employer was sympathetic but concerned. I wasn't sleeping, barely eating. The stress was destroying me. And then, Olivia called with news that changed everything. "Nathan, I think I found something. Something big." My sister's voice was tense with excitement. "What?" I asked. She took a breath. "I still had access to Derek's laptop. He'd given me his passwords when we were engaged. I know I probably shouldn't have, but I logged into his cloud storage. And I found a folder. God, Nathan, it's everything." My hands started shaking. What do you mean, everything? Olivia's voice went quiet. Photos, videos, screenshots, dating back to high school. He documented it all. Every person he targeted, every campaign of harassment. He kept it like trophies. And it's not just you. There are at least a dozen other people. Some from high school, some from college, some from his workplaces. He's been doing this systematically for 20 years. I couldn't breathe. Are you sure it's authentic? She laughed, but it sounded hollow. I'm looking at a video of him and his friends planning how to destroy you. It's dated from our junior year. They're sitting in someone's basement talking about the fake profile they're going to create, laughing about it. It's time-stamped, Nathan. It's real. I immediately called Rebecca, then Detective Ramos. Within 2 hours, we were all in Rebecca's office. It was me, Olivia, Rebecca, Thomas Garrett, and Detective Ramos. Olivia had brought the laptop and logged into Derek's cloud storage while we all watched. The folder was labeled Archives and was buried several layers deep in his file system. Inside were subfolders organized by name. Mine was one of the largest. I watched as Olivia opened it. Photos of me from high school, clearly taken without my knowledge. Screenshots of the fake profiles, including drafts with notes about what to post. Text message conversations between Derek and his friends coordinating their harassment. Photos from the hospital after my concussion, which someone must have sent him a. He'd saved them with the caption, "Mission accomplished." But the most damning thing was the videos. Short clips, clearly. Filmed on phones, of Derek and his friends discussing their plans. In one, dated from my sophomore year, Derek is sitting in a basement with 3 other guys, laughing as he explains how he's going to accuse me of taking photos in the locker room. The beauty of it, he says on camera, is that even when they prove he didn't do it, everyone will still think he's guilty. Reputation destroyed. Another guy asks, what if he tells his parents? Derek grins. His parents don't give a shit about him. I've met them. They think he needs to toughen up. They'll never believe him. Watching that video, seeing teenage Derek calmly discussing how to destroy me while I was just trying to survive, broke something in me. I had to leave the room. Stood in the hallway of Rebecca's office building, hands braced against the wall, trying not to vomit. Rebecca came out after a few minutes. Nathan, this is it. This is everything we need. He documented his own crimes. I turned to look at her. Why would he keep this? She shook her head slowly. Narcissism. Arrogance. Some people keep trophies of their conquests. He probably never thought anyone would find it. Never thought he'd face consequences. Back in the office, Detective Ramos was on the phone with the prosecutor. Thomas was methodically copying everything onto an external drive, making sure we had backups of backups. Olivia sat quietly in a chair, staring at nothing. I sat beside her. Thank you, I said quietly. She looked at me with tears streaming down her face. I almost married him. Nathan, if you hadn't told me, if I'd married him up. Her voice broke. I took her hand. But you didn't. You listened. You believed me. That's what matters. We sat there for a while, 2 siblings who'd never been particularly close, bonded now by shared trauma and determination to stop a monster. Over the next week, the case exploded. Detective Ramos brought in additional investigators. The prosecutor, after reviewing the new evidence, escalated the charges significantly. Derek was now facing multiple counts of criminal harassment, conspiracy, assault, and cyberstalking. The historical evidence, combined with the recent harassment, built an ironclad pattern case. But more than that, other victims started coming forward. Once word spread through old classmates that Derek was being investigated, people reached out with their own stories. A woman from his college who'd been harassed until she transferred schools. 2 former co-workers who'd been driven out of their jobs by Derek's systematic campaigns. A neighbor from his apartment building who'd filed complaints about his threatening behavior. Each new victim added to the mountain of evidence. Derek's attorney tried to suppress the cloud storage evidence, arguing it was obtained illegally. But Rebecca countered that Olivia had legitimate access given to her by Derek himself during their relationship, and she had provided it voluntarily to law enforcement. The judge denied the motion to suppress. Derek's carefully constructed life began to unravel publicly. His employer, the medical device company, placed him on administrative leave pending the investigation. Local news picked up the story. Sales executive accused of decades-long harassment campaign. His LinkedIn profile disappeared. His social media went dark. The civil lawsuit he'd filed against me was quietly withdrawn by his attorney, who clearly realized it was now legally untenable. The criminal trial was set for 6 months out. In the meantime, the prosecutor offered Derek a plea deal. Plead guilty to reduced charges, accept a 2-year prison sentence, mandatory therapy, and permanent restraining orders from all victims. Derek refused. He was going to fight this in court. His attorney's strategy became clear in pre-trial hearings. They were going to argue that Derek had been a troubled teenager who made mistakes, that he'd reformed, and that his documentation of past events was part of his therapy and self-reflection, not trophy-keeping. They painted him as the real victim, a man whose past was being weaponized against him by vindictive people who couldn't forgive. It was bullshit, but it was coherent bullshit. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The courtroom was packed every day. Victims, supporters, journalists, curious onlookers. I testified for an entire day, walking through every incident, every piece of evidence. Derek's attorney tried to break me on cross-examination, suggesting I was exaggerating, that I'd misremembered, that I was motivated by jealousy. But Rebecca had prepared me well. I stayed calm, stuck to facts, let the evidence speak. Olivia testified too, describing how Derek had lied to her, how he'd become aggressive when confronted, how she'd discovered his archives. Derek's attorney tried to paint her as a scorned ex-fiancée out for revenge, but she dismantled that narrative with quiet dignity. Other victims testified, each one adding to the picture of a man who systematically targeted vulnerable people for his own gratification. The videos from Derek's archive were played in court. Watching the jury's faces as they saw teenage Derek laughing about destroying me, I knew we'd won. Derek himself testified in his own defense. He was polished, remorseful, explaining that he'd been a troubled kid who'd made terrible mistakes, that he'd kept the archives as part of his recovery process, to remind himself of who he didn't want to be anymore, that he'd changed, grown, built a life around making amends. He was convincing, almost believable. But then the prosecutor, a woman named Dr. Carol Ann Chena. No, wait, I need to use a different name. Let me revise that. The prosecutor, a woman named Lisa Thornton, who'd been handling cases for 19 years, absolutely destroyed him on cross-examination. She walked him through each video, each photograph, each documented incident, asking him to explain how keeping these was therapeutic. Mr. Brennan, can you explain why this video of you and your friends laughing about Mr. Dawson's hospitalization would be part of your recovery? Derek stumbled. I kept it to remember... To remember what exactly? The joy you felt when you successfully hurt someone? She didn't let him recover. For 2 hours, she systematically dismantled his narrative, exposing every lie, every contradiction. By the end, Derek was visibly angry, his mask slipping just like it had with Olivia. The jury saw it too. Deliberation took 8 hours. When they came back, Derek was found guilty on 17 counts. The judge sentenced him to 6 years in prison, with mandatory psychological treatment and permanent restraining orders against all victims upon release. As the bailiff led Derek away in handcuffs, he looked at me. For just a second, our eyes met across the courtroom. I saw rage there, and hatred, and disbelief that he'd finally faced consequences. Then he was gone. Outside the courthouse, I stood with Olivia, Rebecca, and several other victims. News cameras surrounded us. Rebecca gave a brief statement about justice and accountability. When they asked if I wanted to say anything, I thought about it for a long moment. For 15 years, I carried the weight of what Derek Brennan did to me, I finally said. I was told to forget it, to move on, that it was just teenage drama. But trauma doesn't have an expiration date. What happened to me was real, and it mattered. Today proved that it mattered. I looked at the cameras. If you're someone who's been told to get over abuse, to forgive and forget, to let go of the past, know that your pain is valid. Know that perpetrators counting on your silence doesn't mean you owe them your silence. Speaking up is hard, fighting back is hard, but it's worth it. As we left the courthouse, Olivia linked her arm through mine. I'm proud of you, she said quietly. I looked at my sister, this person I'd never been particularly close to, who'd believed her fiancé over me at first, but who'd ultimately done the right thing. I'm proud of you too, I said. You could have looked the other way. You could have chosen him. She shook her head. No, I couldn't have. Not once I knew the truth. 3 months after the trial, I was sitting in my apartment when I got an email from Justin Lambert, my old high school classmate who'd testified. It was a link to a news article. The headline read, "Former sales executive sentenced in landmark harassment case prompts corporate policy changes." The article detailed how Derek's employer, shaken by the trial's revelations, had implemented comprehensive anti-harassment training and victim support systems. Other companies were following suit. Derek's case was being taught in law schools as an example of how psychological abuse could be successfully prosecuted even years after the fact. "Guess you started something," Justin wrote in the email. Maybe I had. Or maybe I'd just been the first person with enough support and evidence to hold Derek accountable. Either way, it felt like something had shifted. My parents eventually reached out, 6 months after the trial. My mom called one evening, her voice small. "Nathan, I'm sorry. Your father and we didn't understand. We didn't protect you when you needed us to." It wasn't enough, not really, but it was a start. "I know," I told her. "I'm still angry about that, but I'm glad you're trying to understand now." We're rebuilding our relationship slowly. Trust, once broken, takes time to repair. Olivia and I have grown closer through all this. She's dating again, more carefully this time, with clearer boundaries. She jokes that she's got a better bully detector now. I've started seeing Dr. Emily Warner, a trauma therapist with 21 years of experience, to work through everything. Not just the Derek stuff, but the whole experience of not being believed, of having to fight for my own credibility. "You know," Dr. Warner told me in one session, "what you survived wasn't just the original trauma. It was the betrayal of everyone who should have protected you. That's often harder to heal from than the abuse itself. She's right. But I'm healing anyway, slowly. Work has stabilized. My employer was supportive throughout the trial, even gave me extended leave to deal with everything. I've been promoted since then, leading a team on a new project. Some nights I still have nightmares about high school, about being trapped in that bathroom, water dripping down my face while Derek and his friends laugh. But they're less frequent now. And when I wake up, I remind myself, I'm not that powerless kid anymore. I fought back. I won. Derek served 4 years before being released on parole. He's required to check in regularly, continue therapy, and maintain no contact with any of his victims. Last I heard, he's working as a warehouse manager in another state, using a different name professionally. His Google results are dominated by the trial. His LinkedIn is gone. His career in sales, his life of success, built on a foundation of carefully hidden cruelty, all of it's gone. Some people might say I should feel satisfaction about that. Mostly I just feel tired. Glad it's over, but tired. Justice, it turns out, is exhausting. But it's also necessary. Closure isn't about revenge or even seeing someone punished. It's about knowing that the truth mattered, that what happened to you was real and wrong, and the world acknowledged it. That's what I got from all this. The validation that I wasn't crazy, wasn't weak, wasn't making it up. That what Derek did was criminal, and he paid for it. I still get contacted sometimes by people dealing with similar situations. People who were bullied, who weren't believed, who are trying to decide whether to speak up about abuse that happened years ago. I always tell them the same thing. Your truth matters. Your pain is valid. And while the path to justice is hard, the alternative of carrying that weight in silence forever is harder. Last month, I ran into a kid at a coffee shop wearing a shirt from my old high school. He was maybe 15, 16, sitting alone working on homework. Without thinking, I approached him. "You go to Riverside?" I asked, naming the school. He looked up, surprised. "Yeah. You're an alum?" I nodded. "Long time ago. How is it there now?" He shrugged. "It's okay, I guess. Better than it used to be," my older brother says. "They're real strict about bullying now, like instant suspension strict." I felt something warm in my chest. That's good. That's really good. As I walked away, I thought about 17-year-old me, sitting in those same hallways, feeling hopeless and trapped. That kid had no idea he'd survive. No idea he'd fight back years later and win. No idea that his pain would eventually mean something, would maybe even help, protect other kids like him. I wish I could go back and tell him. Tell him to hold on, that it gets better, that justice hour, real, meaningful justice hour is possible. But I can't. All I can do is keep living, keep healing, keep being proof that abuse survivors can build good lives despite everything. And maybe that's enough. My sister called last week asking if I wanted to come to Sunday dinner at our parents' house. I hesitated. Old wounds, old tensions. But then I thought about how far we'd all come, how hard growth is, how much courage it takes to admit you were wrong. "Yeah," I told her. "I'll be there." Because healing isn't a destination. It's a process. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is keep choosing it, over and over, even when it's hard, even when part of you wants to stay angry and hurt forever. Derek Brennan took 4 years of my life. I spent another 15 years carrying that trauma. But he doesn't get to take anything else. Not one more day, not one more moment of peace, not one more ounce of my future. I survived him. I exposed him. I made sure he faced consequences. And now I'm choosing to live, really live, in the life I've built, despite everything he tried to do to me. That's the real victory. Not the prison sentence or the news coverage or the validation. The real victory is sitting here, in my apartment, planning dinner with my family, leading projects at work, seeing a future I want to live in. The real victory is knowing that no matter what Derek Brennan did to me, he never broke me. Not then, not now, not ever. And if I can leave anything behind, any message for people fighting similar battles, it's this. Your trauma doesn't define you. Your resilience does. Hold on, speak up, fight back. You deserve justice. You deserve peace. You deserve a life unburdened by the weight of someone else's cruelty. And you can have it. I'm living proof. If you enjoyed this, I'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.